Okay, so let's get into brass tacks here. Is there a framework? Is there a structure? Is there a system to putting together a transformational conversation?
There you are. There is my transformational conversation. So for those of you who haven't got video, it's a little hexagon followed by a big hexagon. That's all it is. So basically, in science or in baking, if you want transformation to happen, you have to put the thing in a container with boundaries. So the structure for a transformational conversation is actually not all the open questions that we're taught are useful. It's about actually creating the container for the conversation before we start having it. And the thing that frames the container are three things. Number one is, what are we doing today in this conversation? How are we going to do that today? And how will we know we've done it? So what I did with that house sales lady was I took control of the conversation and said, by the end of this conversation, I'll make an offer if you will send me a photograph of the front view and the back view. But to be clear on that, builds trust. It makes people feel heard. It enables you as the salesperson to start from where they need to start and not some random place that work with other people.
How do we do this? Let's make this slightly more complicated. We're going into a B2B sales conversation. The buyer has raised their hand. They've probably done a little bit of research on their own side, and they've got a problem. I can give you some hard kind of anecdotes here if that makes it easier, but I'll try and keep it open-ended at first. We're going into a conversation. They know they've got a big problem. We know the solution to the problem, but we feel like we're going to get their backs up if we say, in this phone call, I'm going to tell you this is what's wrong. The outcome is that you buy the solution and solve your problem. How do we go about those kind of conversations where, again, we are selling this product day in, day out, so we are undoubtedly more knowledgeable about this one sliver of this individual's business than perhaps what they are? How do we go to the conversation framing things up, creating boundaries without, again, sounding like, or without the buyer feeling like we're trying to manipulate them to a predisposed outcome?
I think you ask them. So a lot of sales can feel, so I'm not a sales professional and I have been on the end of many. Sometimes it feels like you're on transmit.
Yep.
And I think the skill is to co-create the conversation, to work out together what it is that needs to happen. And therefore to do what is useful to them rather than what is your preference. So one of the things that I've learned over 30 years of talking to people about conversations and having conversations with people, and really interestingly, watching other people having conversations, which is the real place to do the learning. And we'll come back to that in a minute, because there's something interesting that I think salespeople could do that would make a real difference in your development. But the real skill is to negotiate it together to make sure that the conversation that we're going to have is going to serve the person who you're having it with. There's a guy who's written a lot about trauma. His name is Peter Levine, and he says that trauma is too much, too fast, too soon. Look at your face as I'm saying that. You're going, oh yes.
Mm-hmm. So I'll interrupt you slightly here. I'm smiling because the best advice I ever get on the podcast when I'm chatting with people like yourself, Claire, is stuff that when you look back at it, you go, that's common sense. Why haven't I pondered that in the past? Because that makes total sense, right?
Total sense. And actually, nothing that I ever say is anything more than common sense. It's just that people don't know they know it. Mm-hmm. So what will happen? That too much, too fast, too soon. People who are listening will have experienced that sometimes, but they may not have articulated that's what happened. But so too much, too fast, too soon. So people give too much information too quickly and too early in the conversation. So I would say don't give a solution until the person that you're talking to is really clear what is their question. Because once they're clear what their question or their hunger or their need or whatever it is you describe in sales is, then your offering will make sense. But if you give it too early, I'm not saying it's going to be the same trauma as being in a tsunami or anything like that, but it's not going to be received well. So it's all about timing, and it's all about how much we give at the point we give it.